I'm Michael, and today we're going to talk about continuing improv GMing. If you followed the last video or you have Dogs in the Vineyard, which a lot of this is essentially written out in, you should have an inciting incident. You should know what your factions are. You should know what happens if the PCs were not to show up. What would all these people do if the PCs were never there? And finally, you should know what these factions will want from the PCs once they get involved, because PCs tend to throw a wrench in the works. So what you're going to want to do is create a chain of consequences as the characters do things. But first, there tends to be this desire to equate consequences with punishment. Consequences simply mean I do this, therefore the next thing happens. If I pet a friendly puppy, the puppy will like me more. That's the consequence. If I pet a friendly cat, the consequence is it'll like me more until it decides to bite me. So consequences is not a bad thing, and don't see it as a punishment. It's just this is the next thing that happens in the story because of what the character does. This frees up you as a GM so that you're no longer having to set up like, oh, they'll just encounter, and they'll go here, and they'll go here, and then you're creating a railroad or a story to be laid out in front of them. Instead, you put them in this, and I don't want to use the term sandbox because sandbox tends to mean something specific, but you're dropping them into an open world where what they do is going to make a difference, and the players are going to feel like they had a massive say because they did. And this also means that you as a GM will have a bit more fun in some respects because you're not just going to the places you already knew you were going to go to. You get to be surprised. So what you're going to be doing is adjusting what the NPC does as the players screw up what they were going to do. You get to do the exact same adjustment. So if, for example, you have a bishop who has taken over this small town and basically made them rise up against the mages, which the characters are. This is Ars Magica. So he has basically gotten all of these people convinced that the mages are bad people, and the players decide to send in their sort of forward team in there to try to do something about it. Once he discovers that they've got people in town, it's pretty simple. He's going to probably want to lock them up. He is zealot over the fact that mages are evil. He wants to take them out. So anybody who's working for the mages is, by definition, evil. He's an easy one to figure out. But what about the city mayor, who doesn't know if the bishop's correct or not? Because they've had dealing with mages before. It's been fine. But they are still pious. But the bishop's also an asshole. And the bishop is taking over and going beyond where they should be going. They have essentially kicked the mayor out of power in any real sense of the word. We got to decide, is the mayor more pious than they are ambitious? Do they agree with what the bishop's doing? As we figure they don't agree with what the bishops are doing, the mayor's not necessarily going to go all out against the bishop. They can't exactly just turn on this massive source of power, but they might let some things slide. And it's more interesting that way because we have the bishop, who's sort of the big bad that's being set up. We know where he stands. We know that he is like a hard, firm line unless something really major happens. Mayor, he might be more into it. Then we decide, what if the mayor's assistant is being paid to keep an eye on things? Are they nervous when the players show up? Do they go and tell the bishop immediately after what happened? Maybe they try to get a bribe from the players if they think they can do something about it. So if this person's being paid, how do they feel about it? And this chain of consequence goes up. What you don't always want to do is have the person who's going to help them have a servant who immediately runs and tells the other person, because then it sort of feels like it didn't matter what they did. Now, if it happens on occasion, when a lot of the times they've either had an opportunity to head it off, like they maybe check that he's being a little suspicious, or he tries to go for a bribe from them in order not to tell. If it happens once in a while where they go off and tell, it feels like that's just what the dude did. If it happens every time, it's why did we even bother dealing with the mayor when it was just going to happen this way anyway? Part of the secret of doing this sort of open world improvisational GMing is the players need to feel like what they're doing is not just smoke and mirrors to get to the next thing you plan. You will have more fun if you don't know what's going on. Sometimes I have to tell my players, I didn't come in with a plan. I don't know where this is going. I know what everyone wants, and I know what will happen if you are not there. But it's not like, oh, You're then going to go see this person. You're then going to go see this person. Let them surprise you. Let you have fun in not knowing it. Pulled up those chains of consequences. If they talk to the mayor, how do they handle it? Do they just burst in the middle of the day? People are going to notice. The word's going to get back. Do they sneak into the mayor's house at night when no one's there? One, mayors will be a little more freaked out about that. May not trust them as much, but less people are going to know. So it depends on how they handle it. So if you reach an NPC and you're not entirely sure how they should feel about the players, just take a die, like a D20. Put a 1 is hate, a 20 is love, or whatever makes sense on those opposites. And like in the middle means the opinion's unformed right now. Err towards one side or the other a little bit. They're a little suspicious, or maybe they're a little more inclined to look for help. But roll the die and just put that somewhere on that spectrum. If I roll a D20 and I figure, oh, a 20 is they're hugely in favor of what the player characters want, a 1 is they're dead set against it. If I roll a 12, this is someone who is open to speaking with the player characters, maybe still a little suspicious, maybe wants their own interests looked after. If it's a 17 or 18, maybe this is someone who believes enough in what the player characters want to do that they are willing to take risks they wouldn't otherwise take. Same thing on the opposite side. If it's just a little bit underneath, they could be swayed, or they're at least going to be a little too nervous to maybe go against them. But if they're on the far side, they might be the kind of person who mouths off when they shouldn't, which is also fun. So as long as you're laying out this chains of consequences, it goes to the next thing, and then figure out, and maybe take a moment, let them know while they're talking amongst themselves and trying to figure it out, take some notes. Now that the mayor has done this, how are other people in town going to react? His assistant's going to be a little bit nervous about it, but maybe he's not going to go immediately. Maybe he'll try for the bribe. We've got the head of the Blacksmiths Guild being employed by the bishop to create weapons and armor for it. He's sort of okay with what the bishop wants right now because he's putting money in his pockets. You have the local Thieves Guild doesn't like it because once the mages are wiped out in this area, he's going to be trying to crush down on other types of what he sees as sin and crime as well. So you have different factions who might be willing to help the players, or even if they see some weakness, launch their own plans against them. But if you keep making a little bit of notes, some notes like this to figure out what's happening because of what the players did, you can stop prepping a 5-act story. I do recommend actually looking at a good example of 5-act story. I'm going to put an example down in the show notes. Film critic Hulk has done a really good job of breaking down the 5-act structure, which gives you a little bit more to work with. So if you look at that 5-act structure, it can not only give you an idea for these are the things that maybe should be happening, but also can give you an idea for pacing of a story. To go further into pacing of a story with something we'll talk about another time, this chain of consequences will let you go from I have an initial situation and the players are the firework that gets thrown in the middle of it to where everything lands after the players have screwed up all the plans that everybody else had. And you'll have players who feel that they are invested because they're not just following the script that you've laid in front of them. You'll have players who will want to do crazy, stupid, wonderful things that you never would have guessed, that sometimes when you say yes to something that you're like, that's a foolish thing to do, they pull it off. Sometimes they don't, and that's also fantastic. But it's their decision, and it's not what you've decided to have. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe down below. Let me know if you've got any questions or anything else that you want to see. I'm Michael. I'm the Improv GM.